Hi. There are groups of people in pretty much every country who could be considered to be fundamentalist, traditionalist, and are often part of a religious group, or a political group, or a cultural group. There are certain risks for groups like this, and there are groups that superficially resemble these groups, but are not actually the same. So let's take two situations. Situation number one, you are part of a minority in a country, and you are likely being, to some degree or other, persecuted by the majority and maybe by other larger minorities or more powerful minorities. And these people will be, generally speaking, become very tight-knit and work as a community to help each other, to protect each other, to sometimes even get violent on behalf of each other when they are threatened badly enough. On the other hand, literally, see, hand, yeah. On the other hand, there are other people who exist in a majority or even a supermajority who feel that their control of the environment, of the city, of the country, of whatever it happens to be, is being usurped. And they feel threatened by this, whether it's real or whether it has been pushed into their mind by the manipulations of, say, leaders or that are internal or external leaders like politicians or whomever, maybe a YouTuber. And so they start to become paranoid. They start to become, over time, they become also very defensive. However, the difference between these people and the minority is these people still hold the power and they don't want to lose it. And they are willing to abuse it. So they will, and it doesn't necessarily start that way. But as they are whipped over and over and over again, they end up in a state of furor, of anxiety, of fear, of anger, of indignation, of righteous indignation, at which point they become legitimately dangerous. Now, you might say that fundamentalist Christians are a danger in some situations, or Muslims are a danger in some situations, or Buddhists are a danger in some situations. Or you may see an ethnic group that, for whatever reason, seems to be becoming dangerous. But it's always either a very tightly knit group or a subset of groups that have banded together because they have a lot of similarities that allow them to identify as one family, so to speak. So when a majority group or a supermajority group feels like their power is slipping through their hands, or maybe they feel like they don't like that other groups are getting power, they don't like that other groups are getting rights for themselves, and this upsets them because they feel that their own rights are more correct than anybody else's rights at best. At worst, they think their own rights are the only rights that are correct, and anybody else who doesn't agree with them is wrong, and maybe morally and ethically so. So as their anxiety, fear, and then anger become higher and higher and turn into righteous indignation, they go from normal, sensible people who can have a conversation with you to somebody who will stand there spitting in your face, yelling at you, and even physically attacking you. So what happens when a fundamentalist traditionalist gets into that state? They are no longer just fundamentalist traditionalists. They have also become, and again, most of these people are being manipulated into this state. They become fascists. Now, I'll give you an example. In the last century, the suffragettes worked, or suffragettes, depending on who you ask, worked very hard for women's rights. They took a lot of risks, especially minority women, to get rights for women. And sometimes bad things, very bad things, would happen to them. But then during World War II, there was a movement where women were joining it, these suffragettes were joining it, and it was a fascist group. And they were aligning themselves with Hitler. Now, if you don't know Hitler, Hitler was a very psychopathic man who took control of Germany and made himself the supreme ruler of Germany, after which he attacked country after country in Europe, allied himself with Italy and Japan, and had a neutrality pact with the USSR, and millions of people were murdered by Hitler and his fanatical, traditionalist fascists, which were called Nazis. And that is only one story where that has happened. The suffragettes who had allied themselves or aligned themselves with the fascist philosophies of the Nazis, it didn't make sense. But if you think about it, these people had worked so hard to get rights, and then they felt like they had been kind of pushed aside. They had not been given the recognition they deserved or felt they deserved. And they didn't have any control in the new paradigm to shape what they had worked so very hard with. So when the fascists came and said, hey, you can do that with us, we'll let you have that power and control within our framework, the suffragettes ignored the larger picture of that framework. They ignored the fact that they would still be subordinated to men. They would still be within a patriarchy that was vicious, murderous, and extremely bigoted and predatory and prejudiced, because they were going to get the recognition and power they felt they deserved. They became blind to all that was wrong with Nazism. And there was a lot that was wrong. Now, don't get me wrong, the Germans were in a very bad state prior to World War II because the Western powers that had defeated it and the other countries had put extremely punitive terms on them that was keeping Germany in a state of poverty for the most part. And it was very bad. And so Hitler took advantage of that. But that's beside the point. If you are in a position where you find yourself hearing people saying, they're taking away our rights, or look at what they're doing, that's so ethically wrong, I understand how that makes you feel. I've been a minority. I still am a minority in some respects, even though I'm a white guy. Because some of my beliefs, some of my choices are not the mainstream ones. And that puts me in a position of being a target. But you have to remember, the people that are whipping you into a fury, that are saying all these bad things about other people, they are doing the typical divide and conquer tactic of separating you from the rest of the population so they can control you, so they can use you so that they can get power. And you'll get some power, but you will be within their framework of power, and they will dictate to you what you can and cannot do. You will not be free, and you may lose some of the very rights that you're trying to hold on to so hard. Anytime you have a religious teacher or a politician or a regular teacher or anybody else in your community or from outside of your community inciting fear and anxiety and anger and hatred, you are in the hands of a maniac, of a person whose goal it is, who most likely is already wealthy and or powerful, to accumulate more and more and more. And you can see the worst examples of this in countries like Turkmenistan or Kazakhstan or North Korea or Iraq, Iran, historically many other countries. And many of those countries are that way with dictatorships because the CIA was ordered to overthrow through assassination, through economic coup, through a political coup, through a military coup, because that country's leadership did not want to play ball with America. So America sent in the CIA to get power. And see, we call this the country of freedom, but that freedom is actually a myth, especially for countries outside of the U.S. that don't want to cooperate and bow down to America's leaders and business leaders and do what they want them to do. They will either be murdered or displaced or otherwise pushed to the side, and a dictator will be put in place. So that country goes from a situation that oftentimes they had just voted in a democracy, and America swept in and removed that democracy and put a dictator in place and aided and abetted the dictator. There are many, many such stories in the history of America, of France, of Great Britain, of other countries as well. It's not just an American thing. America really learned it from the European nations. So you must be on your guard. Everybody, not just the majority or supermajority who feels like they are in a precarious position, they're about to lose everything. Everybody must be on the alert for this kind of behavior in leaders, because leaders like that have one goal, and that is to take and take and take, and they don't care how many people get hurt or how many people die, and they don't care about you, the group that is helping them. And that is how you go from a very conservative fundamentalist person who is a traditionalist to becoming a monstrous fascist. Be careful, my fellow Americans. You will lose more than you could possibly imagine, including your souls. Thank you for watching, and I hope you understand.